Welcome to the Influential Personal Brand Podcast. This is the place where we help mission-driven messengers just like you learn how to build and monetize your personal brand. My name is Rory Vaden, and I'm the co-founder of Brand Builders Group, a Hall of Fame speaker, and New York Times bestselling author. And this show is to help experts learn how to become more wealthy and well-known. I know you're going to love it. Thanks for being here. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Influential Personal Brand Podcast. AJ Vaden here. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with Jim and Mimi Do today. One, because I love getting to learn from people that I already follow, admire, and respect. But then super selfishly, I know that every single thing they're going to share today would cost thousands and thousands of dollars to pay for. And I get the privilege of learning today along with everyone who's listening. And so, as you guys know, I kind of tell you who the episode is for. And I think it's important that if I think this is an episode that everyone's going to benefit from, I'll tell you up front so that you can set aside the next hour and not wonder, is this for me? So let me go ahead and tell you why I think this is one of those universal conversations that's applicable to everyone who's listening, no matter what stage of business or personal branding that you're in. Number one, we're going to be talking about wealth strategies. And I think this is part, how do you make money, right? But there's another part of it, which is how do you keep the money you make, right? And that's the wealth strategy part. And so if you'd like to talk about how do you keep more of all that money you're working hard for, then this is a conversation for two. Number two, we're going to talk about understanding the importance of structured wealth management. And I think that is also important because there's a concept of money, but then there's all the tools, tactics, practices, and best use cases of how do you actually create structure to handling your finances well. Everyone can learn something with that. Doesn't matter if you have $10 in your banking account or 10 million. There are things to be learned about that. And then what I'm personally most excited for is to learn all the blind spots, the mistakes, the what to avoid, all the things that you just don't get to learn in everyday business marketplace practice. These are the things that you learn from professionals who've been behind the scenes, helped build their own businesses, have worked behind the scenes with other very successful 8-figure, probably even 9-figure business owners that you just don't get the opportunity to have these conversations very often. And that's what I'm most excited for. So Jim and Mimi, I am so excited to spend the next roughly 50 minutes with you. But I also want to kind of give a joint bio of both of you. So you guys have a professional bio for everyone. So this dynamic duo is the dual founders of Do Wealth Management, specializing in providing fractional family office services for 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs. And with a combined experience of over 30 years doing this, they have helped countless business owners protect, grow, and protect, transfer, which I think is a big part of conversation as well, their wealth strategically. So Jim and Mimi, welcome to the show.
Thanks, AJ.
Thank you so much for having
Great
us.
to be here.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Jim and I will try not to talk over each other.
Yeah, which is going to be hard because we've been married for 32 years. So that's
exactly what Rory and I do, like when we're on podcast interviews. And so now like we have like all these like just best practices of, we have like an eye, and he knows if I'm giving him the eye, like I'm answering this first. This eye movement. That's what we do. But I'm so excited to have this conversation. And where I'd love to start is just helping people, I think, even understand what wealth management is. That's a term that's really broadly thrown around in different business communities. You hear people talk about wealth management, but what is that? Like, what do you actually do to manage your wealth?
You want to take that, Meme?
I'm going to let Jim take it. Yeah, I'm giving him the eye.
You always got to ask your wife first for permission.
Okay.
That's a smart thing to do. Wealth management comes in all kinds of flavors and sizes and everything else. But I think the key is, let's boil it down to its essence. And the essence is really the 3 pillars of wealth management, which is protecting what you're making and you're building, managing what you're creating and building, and then also growing what you're creating, the money you're making and everything else. And I think that people overcomplicate it, because what you really want to do is think about, what do you want to achieve with your money? What are your goals? What matters to you? And if you think about it, there's a lot of things you can do with your money, but there's only three things that will make you happy. And the three ways you can be happy spending your money is spending money on experiences with people you love, spending money to get your time back, and giving your money away. Those are really the only three ways you can get happier with your money. So thinking about in that context of what is it that you want to achieve that would create memories with people you love? What is it that you would want to achieve that allows you to buy back your time? And then what would you like to achieve that would allow you to give back? And if you do those three things, you'll be much happier. So those would be the essence of what it means to manage your wealth.
I love that. I just finished reading this book called Die with Zero.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's a fascinating, interesting book. And there's lots of things I agree with, a few things I didn't agree with. But I think there's something you can learn from anything. And one of the biggest takeaways is, how are you spending your money to have better life experiences, right? And I love what he said at the very end of the book, which is at the end of your life, right? No one's going to put on their tombstone had 10 million in net worth. And it was like that really simple but common reminder. It's like memories are what you have at the very end, right? It's like, what did you do with the people you loved? What did you do with the money you had to help people around you? And that was like a very profound kind of ending for me of like, yeah, like, am I just hoarding money away for a rainy day? Or am I doing it to grow the joy and experiences of me, others, and serving the causes that I so deeply believe in? So I love that you brought that up right here in the front, because I don't think a lot of people talk about that.
Yeah, we think about that all the time. The entrepreneurs, business owners who we work with, I mean, all of them give back the legacies that they've created. And so that's why we love what we do and the people who we serve. It's just, again, about giving back experiences, creating memories, like you said.
Yeah, I think that's at the end of the day, right? It's like, what are we making all this money for, right? Like, what is it all for? So I'd love to kind of start with that, because a lot of the people that you work with have made a lot of money, right? And I would love to hear from you guys, like, what are some of the most simplistic but helpful strategies that you have learned from very, very, very successful and wealthy people, including your own practices, that anyone can employ to help them have the same wealth strategies as, today's billionaires?
Yeah, probably the first thing I would say is the most important thing, or one of the most important things, is having the right team. Because every entrepreneur over their lifetime, and this is true of whether you're an entrepreneur or not, over your lifetime, you're going to pick up an accountant, an insurance agent, a banker, maybe an investment advisor, an attorney, maybe to do your will or your trust, or maybe an attorney for your corporate world. You're going to get these different professionals. And if you picture those like spokes on a wheel, like I have behind me, usually that's what we call a financial flat tire, because they're usually not all A players. They're not talking to each other. And the worst part is you were in the middle of that wheel trying to manage that team when you don't have the time and you don't speak the languages of tax, legal, insurance, and investments. So the first thing I think is to evaluate your team and to try to up-level that team so you have A players that are pulling for you and serving you and not serving themselves in silos, which is what we see a lot.
I have a question about that, because I think it's very hard to find a good team, the right team. Maybe good's not the right word, but the right team for you, right? And I think one of the things that we have discovered is it's exceptionally difficult to find really amazing vendors, partners, teams. So how do you do that? Like, how do you know that you have a good one? How do you know that what you're entrusting someone with, which in this case is a lot of our livelihoods, right? Our finances of going, right? It's not only that, hey, they're not going to do anything corrupt or, experience malpractice, but it's like they're making good decisions and I can trust them. Like, how do you discern that?
Yeah, one of the things is to look for specialists. There's a lot of generalists out there, and who say that they serve entrepreneurs and some retirees, et cetera. And so entrepreneurs and business owners need specific strategies, specific tax planning, specific wealth strategies that we're going to be talking about today. And if they don't specialize, it's just kind of like I think it's the correct information. It's like if you were to see, you needed a surgeon in a certain area, let's say a heart surgeon. You wouldn't go to a surgeon an orthopedic surgeon who just specializes in limbs, hip surgeries, knee surgeries, and things like that. So specialty is one of the things to definitely look at.
Yeah, I got two ways I'd answer that, AJ. One is what everyone on the call could do to evaluate their team. And then the up level, which is finding someone who can do that for you, who has expertise, right? Because always if you find an expert that can do it for you, that can be the right answer. So if you're evaluating your team, which you should, I would say everyone on the call, write down your professionals on a wheel, your accountant, your attorney, your insurance agent, and then rank them 1 to 10. And then once you rank them 1 to 10, 1 being should have fired them yesterday, 10 being they're the most amazing advisor you've ever met, then ask yourself, why am I rating that person a 7 or a 9 or a 2? Right? Because if you don't really have a good reason why you're rating your professional, because I often hear entrepreneurs will say, well, I like my so-and-so. Why? Because they return my calls and they're nice to me. Okay, well, there's more to that to decide if someone's a really qualified professional. So there are 5 areas that I would say you should look at. The first area is education and credentials. Second area would be looking at their regulatory history, which you can look up on the websites, whether it's your state board of accountancy, your state board of insurance, your bar association. The third thing would be their specialty, as Mimi said. What's their specialty and how does that apply to you? Also their experience. How long have they been doing this? And then the fifth thing is their personality and their follow through. If you're trying to get a first meeting to evaluate a professional and they can't even get the meeting set up, or they don't follow up and let you know when the meeting is, then you can't trust them to do a good job when you're actually working with them. So those are 5 areas you can look at. Now, the up level is when you get to a place where you can hire a firm that actually builds your team out for you. And that's really what we talk about in the Fractional Family Office, where you have a firm that knows how to build those. I know we've been doing this for 26 years, our company that we started together in 1999, and we've got over 500 of the top professionals in every area of tax, legal, insurance, and investment. So when we have a new client, we evaluate their team and then we go, hey, your accountant's no good. Let's bring in an A player that we've worked with before. Your insurance agent is not the best. Let's get an A player that we've worked with before. So that would be the next level when you can actually afford to hire someone to build the team and run the team and to manage the team for you.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I love, the specialist component of it, because I think a lot of people are like, I just want a one-stop shop, right? And that means you're getting just surface level experience over everything and deep experience in nothing. I think that happens a ton because people don't have the time, right? And they're just like, I just need one person who can do all the things. And that at some point is no longer serving you very well. And then I love the other part of, hey, evaluate who you've got. And I love those 5 criteria. I think those are really healthy. And then knowing when have you outgrown them. And I think that's the up level part. At some point, if you continue to be successful in what you're doing, you could likely outgrow the team you have. So it's making sure that you're evaluating those in the upline. I think those are really good, healthy parameters to start this conversation. So you mentioned this, Mimi, with what are some of those wealth strategies and tax strategies we're going to talk about. Let's talk about those. What are the wealth strategies that we as entrepreneurs need to be aware of? And then I'd love to talk about taxes, because I find taxes fascinating and frustrating at the same time. But we'll start with the happier of these 2 topics, the wealth strategies. What do we need to know as entrepreneurs? What do we don't know that we should know? Maybe start there.
Yeah, I know one of the things that, especially in our industry, entrepreneurs are listening to friends, listening to professionals who really don't understand how to give professional advice specifically to the business owners. And so the main thing is, number one, to look and find a professional who specializes in working with business owners. And then also looking for somebody who isn't there to sell products. There's so many who kind of a back-ended way come in and say, you need this type of a product because it's going to save you this, or it's going to help you with tax planning. And really what's behind the scenes is commissions. It's about, so if a professional comes in to sell you a product, because there's a big commission at the end. So that's something definitely to look out for, since that is often sold as a wealth strategy or a wealth plan, and some other things. So anyways, Jim, what are some of the other things that?
I like to think there's sexy things about wealth planning, and then there's things that are not sexy at all. And entrepreneurs love the sexy stuff. So I want to scratch that itch, but let's start with the non-sexy stuff, right? So when I talk about the main pillars of wealth management, protect, manage, and grow. Protect means things like insurance. Everybody hates insurance.
Yeah.
It's like a necessary evil, but overpaying for insurance or not having the right coverages could put you at risk if you ever get sued, if there's a problem with your business. So, that protect is really important. Also, entity structure. I've seen entrepreneurs, they get all these complicated entities way before their time that becomes difficult to manage. They don't manage them correctly. They're not keeping them compliant, which risks blowing up even if you get sued if you're using it to protect you, or too simplified. They don't have enough stuff because they've grown enough wealth where they need more on the entity structure. So I could spend a lot of time on that. But those are not sexy, but those are critically important. Then on the more fun stuff like grow, entrepreneurs love to grow their money. And one of the problems entrepreneurs have is that, and we fall into this category, you start with something that has a possibility, right? We started our company 26 years ago. No one would have believed we could have made it because most businesses fail. So we're believing in possibilities. There's a possibility we could make this work. And then guess what? We did it. We made it work. We created this really successful company, sold to our employees in 2022, still running the business, Inc. 5,000, 4 years in a row, all these things, right? So we're like, we believe that we can make a possibility come true. Then we have all this money we're making, and now we have to invest it. And guess what? The tendency of the entrepreneur is to invest in things that have possibilities. Hey, my friend's doing the startup. I believe in possibilities because I made this possibility come true. And I want something that's going to make incredible returns like my business. So they end up putting their money in these deals where they lose their money. And I don't know if you've ever done this, AJ, but here's the recipe, right? Hey, here's someone I like. They brought me a deal. It's very exclusive. Most people don't have access to it. I got to get my money to them in 2 weeks because it's oversubscribed. And I look at the idea and I love the idea. This can't miss. And then I look at the financials. It's all up and to the right. I'm going to make so much money off this deal. I throw money in and then guess what? I lose all my money. That's what entrepreneurs do all the time because they want to invest in possibilities. They're going to make them these huge returns like their business. But what you need to do is realize you are the very unusual that made it work and you succeeded. Now to keep your money, because creating a business to make a lot of money is one thing, but keeping your money is the other. So to keep your money, you have to invest in reliable, predictable investments. And those aren't sexy and no one likes to do them. You're like, I don't want to invest in the reliable, predictable, the real estate and the stocks and the private equity and the venture capital, and maybe not too much venture capital, right? I want to invest in Bitcoin and my friend's startup company. So that's a recipe for disaster. So when you start making money, you have to have, first of all, a game plan or a strategy because too many entrepreneurs are living by tactics. So in the art of war, there's a quote I love. It's, tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So before you start investing, you should have your overall investment strategy. That means how much of my money is going to go into real estate? How much is going to go into stocks? How much is going to go into private equity or private debt? How much is going to go into crypto? And then stick with my plan. And within real estate, I don't want it all in multifamily. Look what happened the last couple of years. So I'm going to want to spread it around in different parts of real estate because you get rich by being concentrated in a business, but you stay rich by being diversified outside of that business. So you need a strategy that you can stick to. Otherwise, you're going to run around like you're in Vegas, throwing money at cool sounding stuff. And 10 years later, you're going to say to me, like a lot of entrepreneurs say to Mimi and I made so much money in the last 10 years. Where did it all go? And that happens, unfortunately, too often.
Yeah. And AJ, for us being in the industry, 26 years with our business, we made mistakes as well before having our team, having our own fractional family office, and same thing without having a strategy and specific investment allocation. So we ourselves have, it's easy to fall. So you need the right team and the right strategy in place that's best for you.
Yeah. And just to build off of that, I urged Mimi to make this investment that we made in 2005. Now, if you do the math, that was 20 years ago. And it was $1 million. And I was 100% sure. Remember, I was a very smart investor at the time. I thought I knew more than I knew, which is an overconfidence problem entrepreneurs have. So I'm like, this is a 100% this is going to make it. We're going to make millions off of this deal. And I could tell you why I thought that. And there's a lot of good reasons why I thought that. But guess what? It didn't turn out. And we lost $1 million. Now, $1 million is a lot of money today. Even in our situation, $1 million matters today. But 20 years ago, it was a huge impact on us and our lives. But the way I think about it, because I felt shame. I was embarrassed for a lot of years. I never told people this. But what I learned from that mistake, I like to say, I paid $1 million tuition to get an education most people never get. And then I see entrepreneurs reliving this, right? So we've never made that mistake again. We've built a serious portfolio that's strong and is predictable because I realized I can't invest the way I invested in my business. I've got to invest to stay rich, not to get rich.
I heard a great quote not too long ago is that it's only a failure if you didn't learn the lesson.
Yes.
Right?
So
I love
good.
that.
It's only a failure if you didn't learn the lesson.
Yes.
And sometimes those are really hard, expensive lessons. But as long as we learn, it's worth it. And one of the things that you said, I think is really important since, so many of the people who are listening, also in the midst of building their personal brand, AKA their business, and they're on this entrepreneurial journey in some capacity. And we at Brand Builders Groups, unknowingly to most, we do the unsexy work of strategy, right? And often what people think they're coming to for us is pretty websites and social media posts. And it's not a personal brand, nor is it business, right? And we do the unsexy but foundational work of strategy. And what I have found, and I'm sure you've experienced the same, is that that's what most of us human beings want to skip through, right? It's like, well, that's not where the money comes in, and that's not where the interest is earned. And for us, that's not where everything is pretty and shiny and in the public. It's the hard conversations and the planning and the forecasting and all the things that it's like, when is it just going to be done work, right? And that's what I hear you guys saying. It's like, you got to have a great team, but then you have to have a great plan. In other words, a strategy before you just go spending your money.
Right.
It's so true. Yeah. And you got to think about what you're trying to achieve. And I always say, automate your saving. And even if it's $50 a month, automate your saving. And I used to say this for years, and then I found out Warren Buffett had said it a few times. So for whatever reason, he gets credit. I don't get credit. But the quote is, don't spend and save what's left over. Save and spend what's left over. And so one thing Mimi and I have done for years is every December we sit down and we say, how much more are we going to save and invest this next year than we did last year? And then we put the saving in first. So the saving happens automatically. Even if we're buying a piece of real estate, the money goes out of our checking account into another account with a one-way door, can't come in because we're building up to buy that piece of real estate or whatever it might be. Because I need to move it somewhere where I can't see it. Because if it's sitting in my checking account, and I'm pretty disciplined, Mimi can tell you, but guess what? I like watches. And I'm going to find a watch that I like, and I'm going to spend that money on a watch. So it will happen to the best of you. So save first, spend what's left over. Because if you spend first, we all know this is true. Guess what? There's nothing left over because you can always find something to spend it on. And by the way, like I said at the beginning, you think certain things are going to make you happy, but they will not. The only things that using money will make you happy, as I said, is experiences with people you love, getting your time back and giving it away.
Yeah, I think that's really good. That's so wise.
I love shoes, but they don't hold value like the watches do.
I know.
That's a dangerous thing. My watches have gone up a lot in value, but people say, oh, that's a great investment. I said, no, it's not an investment. That is not an investment, because if I start thinking that, then I'll start buying more watches. I do not think watches are an investment. I don't care what anybody says. Otherwise, I'll buy watches. It's my throwaway money. And if they go up in value, that's great. But it's my money that I know we don't need and we've already saved first. And then I give myself a little reward.
But but I think that's part of the plan right there, is knowing, hey, this is not an investment strategy, right? This is this budget that we have set aside after everything else. It's my fun money, it's my throwaway money, whatever you call it. But that alone is a strategy that most of us aren't taking the time to sit down and actually plan for. So here's what I would like to do. I'd like to hear from you guys. Maybe just like each of you share one or two tips or ideas of like, where would you say are some of the most effective strategies for building wealth today?
One of the most effective strategies. Well, Jim just gave you one is again, saving first. Really, really just because it doesn't matter what level from a startup entrepreneur to a very successful entrepreneur is again, saving first before spending and just really allocating where you want. And then number two is how do you want your money to work for you? And what I mean by that is everybody, we coined a term that's called make rich real. And it means different things to each business owner, each entrepreneur is it taking care of my family? Is it providing for a charity? Is it starting a new foundation? Is it experiences and trips? And so just really allocating to the wealth that you make to what is truly important and that's in your heart. So many of our clients have, for example, have started foundations, have act to rescue charities that wasn't going to survive without some of those things. So those are the two big things.
I think that's good. And I think the whole concept of, I just wrote down save first, spend second, right? It's like simple, but not often practiced.
Yeah. I'm going to go a little different direction on that. The first thing, as I just think about wealth building strategies, the first thing is have someone, and this could be a firm, this could be a person that protects you from yourself. Richard Feynman was one of the greatest physicists who ever lived. And one of his quotes was, principle number one is don't fool yourself. And you're the easiest person to fool. So if one of the greatest physicists said he could fool himself, you can fool yourself too. And I see this all the time with entrepreneurs. They think they're so darn smart. You're not that smart. And by the way, I do this with myself, and I've been investing for 30 years. When I have an investment and I want to invest, I'm getting excited. I stop and I said, Jim, you're not that smart. What else are you not seeing? Now, why do I do that? I do that because it checks me in my overconfidence. But then I also have our team. I don't make any investment. Mimi doesn't make any investment unless we talk to our investment team. And guess what? I don't talk to my friends who are other business owners because they think like I do. And they want to do the crazy, nutty stuff, and they want to buy the NFT, and they want to do all this stuff, which is fine. You just want to have a strategy, how much of your overall investment portfolio should go into an NFT. And by the way, the answer is not 80%, right? Yeah. So having a game plan for that, but having someone, and it's not someone who thinks like you, it's someone who thinks differently than you, that can put you in check and have you just rethink what you're about to do. That's number one. Number two is if you are married, take care of your marriage, because one of the most expensive mistakes you can make in building wealth is to have your marriage fail. It is incredibly expensive and distracting and painful and, on and on and on. So take care of your most important relationship if you're married, which is your spouse. That's a huge wealth building strategy that you need to do. And then the third thing, and this will go in a little bit of a different direction, is taxes. If you're especially a successful business owner, the tax code is written to help business owners do better. And your biggest expense if you're a successful business owner is going to be taxes. So have a well thought out tax strategy, just like you have your allocation strategy that's implemented by good people you trust, and have that updated every single year.
Okay. So first of all, I love that comment of protect your marriage, because that can be one of the most devastatingly expensive things that is the fallout from not doing so. And nice. I think that's a very big deal, a very, very big deal in a culture where divorce runs rampant. And it's like, well, that doesn't just affect your marriage. It affects all parts of your life, your team, your business, your kids, your health. You protect that, the other things kind of tend to work out. We have a policy in our family where it's, God first, marriage second, kids third. Right. And it's as long as we're good with God and we're good with each other, everything else in our life takes care of itself. But our kids do not like it when mom and dad go out on date night. So we have our Wednesday night date night, and every Wednesday they're like, why don't we get to come? And I've had this ingrained conversation with, and I have my boys are little, 5 and 8. And literally mommy and daddy need time together.
Yeah.
Right. And
yes.
Mom and dad have to have a happy marriage so that we can have a happy family. And it's just been one of those fascinating, interesting things where the temptation is so quickly to be well, let's just do a family thing. And then all of a sudden the marriage is non-existent. And so I love that you said protect your marriage, because that is a wealth management strategy of
totally.
You keep that healthy and intact, all these other things work. And then you
Sure.
transitioned into something that I want to spend a few minutes on, talking about taxes. As I mentioned earlier, I am equally frustrated and fascinated by all things taxes, fascinated by how many, exceptions to the rule there are, and how much you have to know and learn to know what those exceptions are, right?
Mhm.
There's a few rules and then thousands exceptions to the rules. That just takes a professional. And that ain't me, right? And it's like, I cannot give enough time to learn all the things that are constantly at play and then changing. But then you talked about having a good tax, strategy, right? And that's just like a business strategy. And that also takes a professional. And it's unique and different by industry and state and your setup. So what I would love to hear from you guys are like, what are some of the more universally applicable tax tips or strategies that entrepreneurs need to know about?
Yeah, I think I would start with the mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they're trying to do their tax planning. As I said, tactics over strategy.
Yeah.
So their buddy said, I did a 831B micro captive, then I'll do that for myself. Well, it might be okay for your friend. It might be a tragedy for you. It could be a big mistake, right? Or, I structured my business as a C Corp instead of an S Corp. A friend of mine did that. And supposedly there's tax savings there, right? So again, you want to make sure that you're not just doing stuff because a friend of yours told you to do these things.
Mhm.
You need someone who understands you very well, your business, and what you're trying to achieve and accomplish to create a good tax plan. So that's the first thing is tax strategy is about the uniqueness of your situation. It's not universal. I can't say, here's what's going to work for these 10 entrepreneurs. It's going to be different for every one of those 10. The other thing is, just like investing, there's risk tolerance when it comes to tax planning. Now, first of all, let me say that there's tax strategy that are really in the area that I would never touch, right? And so I'll just give you an example. We've seen entity structures, trust structures. Sometimes it involves a foundation. Sometimes it involves insurance sales. And magically, through all these different entities, you pay no tax, right? And the old adage about if it sounds too good to be true. So sometimes there'll be a law firm involved, but it's always a little law firm. It's not a big law firm. And there's just a tax court case. There's not a tax court case, but the IRS is going after a business owner in Colorado. It's a dentist. And the dentist did one of these fancy things with trusts and entities to pay no taxes. And the IRS isn't just going for interest and penalties and taxes owed. The IRS is charging the dentist criminally and trying to put the dentist in jail. And the dentist signed that tax return just like you and I sign our tax returns. So be really careful about taking these ideas without understanding the risk. That being said, even within the IRS code, we call them bright line transactions. They're in the code. There's certain things the IRS doesn't like and tries to audit and tries to go after. And then there's other things that the IRS doesn't go after as often, right? So you have a different risk level based on the entrepreneur. So one entrepreneur, or one you could think for any of you on the call, sometimes we meet entrepreneurs that go, I don't care, as long as it's legal, I don't care, I'll take the risk. I want to pay as little in taxes as legally possible. If I get audited and lose, I understand the risk, I am fine with it, right? Other entrepreneurs will tell me, I don't want to take any risk. I don't want to worry about audits. I don't want to worry about having to pay back taxes and penalties and interest, right? Those are different tax plans for those two entrepreneurs.
That's good.
Then where do they get the advice, right? And so here's a huge mistake entrepreneurs make. On the one hand, there are the accountants. And in general, accountants are historians. They take all your information, they file the forms. Sometimes they get it right about telling you what you need to pay in your estimated taxes. But the problem is they're not forward-looking, they're not proactive, they're not digging into your situation and saying, hey, AJ, in your situation, you need to do A, B, or C. Here are different ways to do it. Here are your options. Let's decide what we should do this year, next year, and the year after. They're usually looking in the rearview mirror. So that's a problem. And often CPAs are not up on the latest tax planning because they're so embroiled in filing tax returns.
Yeah.
Then let's take the other extreme. They hire someone called a tax strategist or someone who says that they can help them with tax. Often these people are paid through selling products. Sometimes they're paid a success fee. I would recommend don't ever pay a success fee on tax planning where you say, whatever I save you, you just pay me 10%. That's a huge problem. Why? Because you're creating this environment where that person's going to want to save you as much in taxes as possible, even if there's too much risk, even if you might get audited and you might get into trouble because they get paid on how much they save you, not making a smart decision. So you want to pay someone, a fixed amount, like here's what I'm going to pay you no matter what you save me in taxes. You want to have someone who has experience, who proactively looks forward, who does this all the time, but not someone who gets paid in any way other than directly from you. So you don't want them to get paid if they bring an R&D tax credit expert in and they get spiffed on the side. You don't want them to get paid if they sell you insurance. You don't want them to get paid a referral fee for someone they introduce you to. You need them only to represent you, to understand your tax situation, your risk tolerance and taxes, and then build a tax plan for you. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of options in the marketplace because either people are selling products, getting spiffed on the side, or charging success fees, or you've got the accountants that are kind of stuck in the mud, not thinking. But what you need is a firm that can help you build a tax plan in a way where you understand how you're paying that makes sense, and who can really build one that fits your risk tolerance, and then work with your accountant to make sure it's implemented and documented. So if you do get audited, that you have the proof that you did it right.
Yeah. The thing about this conversation, I think that's really wise. And it's like, there's only uniqueness, nothing universal. And I think that's a really wise statement. And then also referencing the risk tolerance for everyone who's listening. And it's like, because that's the truth. Like, our entities are set up differently and our risk tolerance is different. The states are different. I think where I see so many people challenge, it's like, where do you find these people? Right. And it's like that kind of back to so many people are defaulting to this one size fits all. It's like, oh yeah, I have, my accountant, right, who's a CPA, they do my taxes. And it's like, but yeah, like you said, they're a historian, right? They're not looking ahead. They're only doing what's backwards. And we learned this the hard way when I realized our previous tax firm, and this was an aha moment for me as an entrepreneur, is that for the relationship that we had, I had to come to realize, like, their job was not to go and find out what applied to me. That was my job. And then I would take it to them to vet. And it was like a very aha moment that was very eye-opening and frustrating. Of like, I thought this was your job. Right. And I was like, no, that was my job. And then theirs was just to vet it and go, was it applicable? And what hit me is that if I had not been proactive in that, none of the things that we learned that actually applied to us to have us in the right entity structure for our state and our industry, none of that would have actually gotten done. And that's a scary thought for most entrepreneurs who are trusting all of that to just be done by who they hired. Mm-hmm. So where do people go? Where do you find these people? That's a hard
It's tough. Yeah. It's tough. And I think it's tough. That's why we created this model of the fractional family office, is because we saw that same problem in our own lives many years ago, learned how a billionaire family created this for what reason. And then we said, I wonder if we could do it for ourselves. Because really what you're talking about is having someone in the middle of your wheel who's managing the accountant and the tax planning, who's managing the asset protection, who's helping you with your strategy on the investing and putting it all together. And ultimately, that's the solution that we believe in most. And that's what every billionaire does. The problem is, if you do it the way the billionaire does it, the very smallest family offices cost $2 million a year to run. And Elon Musk and Bezos, they're spending over $30 million each on their family offices. And so that's why we created this model. So if you are not working with someone who can build that for you, then you have to be what we call the air traffic controller. You have to get in there, even though you don't want to, and start holding people accountable. And so with your accountant, I would suggest with everybody, if you're not sure if your accountant's doing a good job or you've outgrown your accountant, I would go schedule a meeting, pay them their hourly fee, and say, show me what we've done the last few years to legally save on taxes. And in my book, I actually talk about this because we went to our CPA. He had been our CPA since I was a school teacher teaching high school math and physics, to when we owned this business and we're making a lot of money. And I said that same question, what have you done for us the last few years? And he said, well, remember I said that you can always buy a bigger house because you get the interest deduction. You always want to make sure you're maxing your 401k, and you could give more money to charity to save money in taxes. And that's when I realized, I went back to Mimi and we're like, this guy's talking about elementary school. We need someone who's in graduate school. So that told us we had the wrong accountant, right? And accountants aren't.
Yeah, for that.
Yeah. So you have to be the air traffic controller, and then you have to be careful that if you're going to entrust yourself to a tax strategist, you got to make sure you understand how they're getting paid, where their compensation is, and are they in a position where they're motivated to have you take risk that may not be appropriate for how you feel.
And I think that's the key takeaway I want everyone to hear. It's like at some point, and you need to evaluate who you're working with and decide, is this still the right person for the season that I'm in? Right. And it's like at some point, we said this earlier, you might outgrow the team. And in this case, it's like, hey, there's a graduation that happens where it's like, this was great for this one phase. I'm now 3 phases ahead. I need a different team, a different thought structure, a different strategy for where I'm heading. Right. And I think that's really good. Everyone who's listening, if you guys want to head over, I'm going to have Mimi and Jim tell you about something that they're offering to this call. We're going to talk about this wealth waste calculator. And you guys can go and get this if you go to Do Wealth, DEW, dowealth.com/influential, and you can grab the wealth waste calculator. Mimi, tell us what that is.
Yeah, it's a tool that we developed, and it's a way. So there'll be several questions and numbers. It's a fun tool. It's an actual calculator that you can put in your numbers. So it'll ask you specific questions, and in the end, it'll give you a number of how much money you are wasting. So that's why we call it the wealth waste calculator. So it's something fun to plug in.
And by the way, our team has spent hundreds of hours creating this thing. It's pretty amazing.
Yes.
This is not like something that someone did in 10 minutes. And one more thing, your listeners might say, well, when would I be ready for a fractional family office to solve all these problems for me, right? And really the starting point is if you have a business, because this is for business owners, once you're doing $1 million of gross revenue and netting at least $250,000, believe it or not, at that level, you can start getting help with a fractional family office. And of course, this goes all the way up to where you could be making, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it could still make sense for you. Did we lose AJ?
I know. Where's AJ?
We lost AJ.
That was fun. My Chrome decided to restart. So I'm going to have you start over, Jim. When you said, some of you are probably wondering when is the right time. So if you'll start over right there. Okay.
Some of you may be wondering, when is the right time where you can actually afford to have a fractional family office? And believe it or not, the starting point is when you're a business owner and you're doing $1 million of gross revenue, netting at least $250,000. At that point, you can actually get the essentials of a fractional family office. And of course, from there up to, if you're doing $200 million of revenue in your business, a fractional family office still could be a really, really smart thing to do. So that's where it would start.
That's good. And I think that's good because that's a lot lower than probably most of us were thinking. I think most of people think, oh, wow, like family wealth office, I probably need to be making $10 million. And it's like, and that's why I love the fractional concept of this. It's like, this is something that you can start way ahead of probably when you thought. So, okay. I know that we only have a couple minutes left. I'm watching the clock. I promise I will only keep you for the hour that we promised, but I have a quick question for both of you, and then we'll wrap this up. But if you guys haven't already, go to dowealth.com/influential and actually use this wealth waste calculator. I think it's going to be super valuable for everyone who's listening. All right. Here's my question for you, Jim. Looking ahead the next 5 years, right? And as we're recording this, we're in spring of 2025, right? So looking ahead between now and call it 2030, what are some of the trends that you foresee becoming more mainstream or more prominent when it comes to wealth management practices?
Great question. And I'm going to answer that, and then I'm going to ask myself a different question. And that is, as far as trends, obviously AI is going to have a big impact on things like wealth planning. It's going to have a big impact on everything. But there are certain things that are not going to change. And there was an interview with Jeff Bezos, and the question was, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And he said, I get asked that a lot. The question I don't get asked that I should get asked more is what's not going to change in the next 10 years? Because it's very hard to predict what's going to change. It's easier to predict what's not going to change and build a company around what's not going to change. So here's what's not going to change in the next 5 years, which is the most important question. Over time, real estate's going to go up in value. stocks will go up in value, private equity will go up in value. All certain things reliably and predictably will go up in value over time. They're going to have their times when they don't go up in value. You want to be investing in reliable, predictable things in a solid portfolio with a strategy over time. And then forget the noise. I hear entrepreneurs are always trying to guess what's going to happen next. Forget about it. You're not going to be able to guess what's going to happen next. And if someone does, guess what? They're totally lucky. So stop watching the news, save first, spend what's left, get yourself on a good game plan, and then also get a good tax plan. And then, of course, the things like protect. But worry about what's not going to change. And what's not going to change in the next 5 years is all those things I just mentioned.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if you guys have ever read the book by Morgan Housel, Psychology of Money.
Love that book.
It's one of my favorite books on money because it talks about just that, right? It's like long-term in mind, conservative nature, focus on the things that are likely not going to change and ignore the rest. Is that it's boring, it's conservative, it's not sexy, but it works, right?
Yep. And you're going to get rich by building a business. You're not going to get rich by picking crypto at the right moment or buying the penny stock or buying that one real estate property that nobody knows is worth a bunch of money. That's not how you're going to rich. That's how you're going to stay rich. You're going to get rich by being concentrated in a business because that's how Americans get rich.
I love that. All right, last question. Mimi and Jim, you can feel free to chime in, but I'm going to ask Mimi this question. It's like, in a world where a lot of people have influence, some of it earned, some of it not, and in a lot of my world, at least, we talk a lot about influencers versus influential, and you guys work with a lot of influential people. So I'd love to hear, like, for you, like, what does influential mean in your world, in your workspace?
Influential, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is we are our entrepreneurs. What we do is we unlock resources for them so that they foster so many different connections to make this world a better place. And we've seen children's charities grow. We've seen foundations thrive. We've seen families leave a legacy of not just wealth from generation to generation, but how they're teaching their kids to think about money, how the money is saving lives, something that's really near and dear to our hearts. Jim and I never ended up having children. We've been married 32 years. We've been working together as a spouse and really being intentional about our relationship. But we just said, what's really important to us? Kids, rescuing them out of poverty. So we've started scholarships because we believe one of the best ways of getting out of generational poverty is through education. And so we've created some scholarships. We're going to continue creating more scholarships throughout the year. So when I hear influencers, influential, it's for us, the influencers are the ones who have been influential to this society by giving back, making a difference, and being role models for others to look up to in how they're truly creating wealth by the use of the money that they have acquired.
I love that. I think that's so awesome. And I think a lot of people talk about, and it's interesting. I think money is a tool, right? Right. And you can wield it for good just as much as you can wield it for evil. And like what I hear you saying is like, there is a major opportunity for people who have been fortunate enough to build a lot of wealth to create influence and have influential opportunities that can change the trajectories of lives, families, generations, if it's used in the right ways. I love
Absolutely.
that. Jim, you want to add anything to that?
I agree with Mimi. And, I think
He agrees with me.
I always agree with Mimi. That's the smart thing. You have to think where you are and what are your capabilities, because influence, a lot of times we think of like the rich and famous who have influence, but everybody has influence and everyone creates a ripple effect. And even the way you and Rory are doing your date nights, right? One of the greatest gifts you can give to your kids is how you model a marriage. And even though they give you a hard time about like, oh, we want to go with you, in the future, they're going to go, wow, I saw how mom and dad handled their marriage. And that gives me a modeling of how, like, Mimi and I didn't have the best parenting as far as marriages and how they were modeled, but we've worked very hard to create a model of our marriage. So it doesn't have to be that you give $1 million to charity, although that's fantastic if you can do that. It can also be other ways you influence people every day in a way that is caring and kind and makes a difference. Because the one person you touch could touch thousands or millions of lives. You don't know what your kids at their age, what they're going to grow up to become. And just what you're doing right now with those kids could have ripple effects that blow your mind in 20 or 30 years. So that's what I would say with influence. It's easy for people to look on TikTok or watch TV and go, now that's the influential person. But it's the person who's kind and who can touch others and who can make a difference and lead people and guide people and teach people. Those are the ones that have true influence that will matter when in the test of time, in the future.
Amen. Well, I couldn't agree more. And I agree with both of you. And I think the conversation of what it means to build wealth, keep wealth, but then also deploy wealth for the good of others is such an important conversation for the growing and scaling entrepreneur to know what to do with the money that they're building so that it does create that lasting legacy and creates influence beyond them. So both of you, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. For everyone who is listening, again, go to dowealth.com/influential. Check out that wealth waste calculator. Stick around, listen to the recap episode that will be coming up next, and we will see you guys next time on the Influential Personal Brand.